It was nearly the 9th toll of the tower bell when I finally looked up from my ledger and noticed how still the archive had become. The copper lanterns flickered softly, throwing tired reflections on the glass casings that lined the room. Beyond, the stone windows, the distant lights of the observatory shimmered faintly, echoing the constellation maps still glowing on my parchment. Everyone else had abandoned their scrolls hours ago. Everyone but him. I could hear the muted clatter of porcelain from the archivist's wing, the one with the silver shutters and the impeccable view of the western horizon. I didn't need to check. I knew he was there. He always lingered, always wordless, always watching. I tried to refocus, adjusting the sequence of the constellation slides for the council's briefing at first light. The alignment was critical. Any deviation, and the reading would falter. But no matter how many symbols I redrew, my thoughts kept drifting back to him, Master Dorian Wells, Celestial Regent. Early 40s, if age still mattered in places like this, composed, exact. The kind of man who made others stand taller without ever raising his voice. And for reasons I refused to name, the space around him always felt thinner, harder to breathe through. He didn't command the room with thunder or flash. He inhabited it. Like gravity made audible. "Still chasing the northern thread?" came a voice, low and deep from behind me. I startled, just slightly, but kept my ink flowing. I turned halfway. There he was, one hand braced against the marble, the other tucked neatly behind his cloak like a character sketched from a forgotten legend. "Yeah," I replied, clearing my throat, trying to align the Cyrex diagrams before tomorrow's reading. He nodded slowly, his eyes gliding across the stacks of inked vellum scattered on my desk. "Good foresight. I've always appreciated that about you." My heart thumped, far. Too loud in the hush, and I hated how easily his words tangled under my skin. "Thanks," I murmured, suddenly hyper-aware of my own hands. Just wanted the sequence to be clean. He stepped closer. Not enough to be inappropriate. Just enough to shift the temperature. "You stay late more than anyone," he said. "Don't think I haven't noticed." I glanced up, uncertain whether it was a compliment or a warning. "I don't like loose ends," I offered softly. A flicker of something like amusement curved at his mouth. "That makes two of us." Silence grew like moss between us. Not heavy, but undeniable. The kind of pause that suggests there's a second conversation playing beneath the first. I broke eye contact first. "So, you heading out soon?" I asked, casually as I could. "Eventually." He stretched his shoulders like he was shrugging off hours. "Needed to finalize a few anomaly logs. I prefer the stillness." "Yeah. Same." He didn't move, not right away. He just looked at me, or maybe through me. Like the version of myself I kept on display wasn't enough to fool him. "You're sharp," he said finally. "Careful. Not like most who bluff their way through these halls." I swallowed. "That means more than you probably realize." He didn't smile, just gave a single nod. "The kind you feel more than see." Then he turned away, heading back toward the shuttered wing. But just before vanishing behind the frosted glass, I saw his hand reach up and lower the blinds. Each one dropped with a crisp whisper, slicing away the lights of the observatory. Slicing me away from the view. From him. And yet, it felt like I was being drawn into something I couldn't name. Something I wasn't sure I wanted to avoid. I closed my ledger, stacked the parchment sheets, and slid them into their casing. The archive felt quieter now. Not just empty, watchful. Even the wind outside the tower seemed to pause. I rose, slung the scroll case over my shoulder, and reached for my overcoat. Click. The sound echoed sharply like a chime struck with intent. Turned slow. My gaze drifted to the arched entrance. The door was locked. Behind it stood Master Wells. His hand still rested on the latch, holding it, letting me see, letting me know. He said nothing, just held my eyes through the glass, then, slowly, turned, and disappeared back into the interior. I stood still, one hand frozen on my coat, unsure whether I should feel alarmed or something stranger. He reappeared a moment later, no longer in the perfect uniform. His sleeves were rolled, his collar open just enough to break the silhouette. He looked different, not casual, just less guarded. His voice was soft, clear. "Why do you always step away when I speak to you?" The words stunned me. I don't," I stammered. One eyebrow rose. I shifted uncomfortably. "I just don't want to cross a boundary." "You're not crossing anything by being seen," he said. "But you hold back. I see that too." I didn't answer. I didn't know how to answer. He tilted his head, motioning toward the reading room. "Come on." Before I could ask why, he was already walking toward the small chamber with dim lanterns and curved wooden walls. Inside, he opened a lacquered cabinet and pulled out a crystal bottle. Amber liquid. Aged. Possibly ceremonial. I stepped in slowly. The air was warmer here. Or maybe I was. He poured 2 cups without waiting for a reply. I lingered just inside, the doorway unsure. "Come in," he urged softly. So I stepped forward. We faced one another across the cluttered desk, the dim glow from a desk lamp softening the lines of his face, making him seem less distant, less guarded. He nudged 1 cup toward me. I didn't take a sip. Instead, I traced the rim with my fingertip, watching the swirling steam rise. "I get that this looks strange," he admitted after a beat. "Locked doors, late-night drinks, like some kind of test." "It does feel like a setup," I said, half amused, half wary. He gave a small nod. "Maybe it is." I studied him carefully. This wasn't a game, not a challenge or a threat. It was a quiet search, an invitation to something unsaid. "I've spent years convincing myself that solitude was armor," he said, "that keeping others at arm's length was strength, control even." He sipped from his cup slowly. "But lately, it's felt more like a cage than a shield." I stared at my cup, suddenly aware of the dry tightness in my throat. "You're not what I imagined when I heard." "Junior accountant," he said. "You're focused, thoughtful. You weigh your words before they fall. That's unusual." Heat rose in my cheeks. I shrugged it off. "I just try not to mess up." His gaze softened. "You haven't." I finally took a small taste, the warmth, settling inside me. "I've always felt like a shadow in rooms full of light," I confessed quietly. "Invisible is safer." He leaned in slightly, voice steady and low. "To me, you stand out." My heart caught. Time seemed to still, like even the air held its breath. I met his eyes, not the detached, professional look I was used to, but something different, something personal. "Why me?" I whispered before I could stop myself. He didn't answer at once. Instead, he stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the dark cityscape. "I've met hundreds of people. Some fade, some pass through," he said. "But you linger. You don't just clock out. You care, even when you don't admit it." I chuckled softly. "Sounds more like an accusation." "To me, it's a compliment." The silence between us grew heavy, stretching and bending time. My cup remained untouched. I placed it down carefully. His eyes stayed locked on mine. Something shifted in that quiet space, not loud or dramatic, but enough to be felt, a new tension settling between us. I couldn't say how long we sat there. The office had fallen silent again except for the faint hum of the city outside, the warm amber liquid in our cups catching the low light. But inside me, My thoughts raged. The beat of my heart, my quickened breath, everything too loud. He hadn't spoken after saying, "To me, you stand out." And I hadn't dared ask him to say it again. My fingers tightened around the cup's base. Looking at him, a sudden realization struck me. This wasn't unfamiliar. That ache, that flutter in my chest that made words stick in my throat, I'd felt it before. I just never named it. Memories rushed forward too fast to hold back. That business trip to Seattle, 2 days, back-to-back meetings, endless dinners. One night, after a late meal, just the two of us waiting for the elevator, standing side by side in that cold metal box. He cracked a dry joke, unexpectedly sharp, and I laughed genuinely. One of the few real smiles I'd seen from him. As we stepped out into the lobby, he placed a hand on my shoulder to guide me forward. Just a touch, brief, casual, except it lingered, longer than necessary. Just the faintest touch of his hand, resting gently between the curve of my spine. I remember pausing, holding still for a moment, wondering if it was all in my head. Maybe he did this to everyone, I thought. But no. It felt intentional. Known, somehow, and comforting. Only when we stepped into the chill outside did he slowly withdraw his hand, and we never spoke of it again. Another flicker. Him at the company winter gathering, his loosened collar hanging casual, leaning near. The counter while I struggled to not be distracted by how his shirt molded to his form. I'd sipped a couple of drinks, maybe more, and found my eyes drawn to him more than the animated slideshow playing behind us. He didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did. I never quite figured it out. Now, in this shadowed meeting room, door, bolted tight, the rest of the world asleep, those moments didn't feel accidental anymore. He shifted in his chair. I mirrored him. Our knees brushed lightly. Not by chance. I swallowed quietly. The brief touch sent a ripple beneath my skin. He stayed still, not pulling away. If anything, he edged nearer. Just a few inches, but enough to fill the air between us with an electric charge, like the calm before a storm. "Can I ask you something?" My voice trembled more than I expected. He nodded slowly, eyes holding mine steady. Are you teasing me?" The question hung heavy and raw between us. A twitch flickered in his jaw. No smile, no smirk, just a calm weight in his gaze. "Would it bother you if I was?" he asked softly. God. I was speechless. My thoughts scrambled, but all I could do was look away. Down at the table, at the floor, anywhere but into his eyes. Because if I looked, I might say something I couldn't take back. Something I'd locked away for so long. My heart pounded in my ears. "I don't know," I whispered. "That's understandable." A pause stretched out, but it wasn't empty. It brimmed with everything left unsaid. He leaned back a bit, giving me room, not retreating, just patient. Always patient, waiting for others to catch up. I traced the grain of the wooden surface with my eyes, swirling along the knots. "Do you—" I started, then stopped. "Do what?" he asked, calm, even. "Do. You do this often?" "This?" "Flirt with coworkers." His face didn't change. "No." I looked up, meeting his gaze. And I believed him. Then why me? The words slipped out before I could hold them back. His eyes softened. "Because I see you." And somehow, that terrified me more than anything else. There's something frightening about being truly seen. Not as a line on a chart. Not as the dependable junior analyst who files spotless reports and burns the midnight oil without complaint, but as a human being, as a man, and right now, I wasn't sure I was ready for that, or even worthy of it. I stood, needing to move, needing air that didn't carry weighty meaning. He stayed where he was, watching me with care. "I should go," I said, though my legs barely obeyed. He didn't stop me. No pleading, just a single nod. Okay, but I could feel the burden of everything unsaid pressing down as I made my way to the door. And I couldn't shake the feeling this was far from over. He exhaled, a long, weary sound that seemed to rise from some deep place inside. I shouldn't have crossed that line, he murmured, rising from his seat. This wasn't right for you. His footsteps whispered softly on the floorboards as he moved toward the exit. I watched him manipulate the lock. The click was subtle but irreversible. You're allowed to leave, he said without facing me. For a moment, I simply stood frozen. My bag dangled from my shoulder, my jacket folded over my arm. I was exactly where I intended to be when I packed up moments ago, prepared to walk away. Except I wasn't. I moved toward the door, slow, almost instinctive. My heart thundered within my chest, far louder than it should for someone merely going home. My hand hovered just above the handle. This was the instant I was meant to exit. Be rational, maintain distance, avoid pain. But his voice echoed in my mind, low and earnest. Because I see you. Now, standing before the threshold with him behind me, I confronted a question I'd never dared ask. What was more terrifying? To leave this space or to remain within it? I inhaled deeply and turned to face him. He lingered by the window, back. Toward me, one hand braced against the frame as if steadying himself, his shoulders stiff, unyielding. Do you really want me gone? I whispered. The words slipped out softer than I expected, but shattered the quiet like crystal. He didn't reply immediately. When he did, his voice was barely audible. No. Slowly, he pivoted. We stood facing each other across the room. I laid down my coat, then my bag. I didn't step closer. There was no need. The space between us was already too compressed. He returned to the table, and I followed suit. This time, we didn't sit opposite one another. We settled side by side, not touching, but not distant either. His presence crackled like electricity in the air. Words were unnecessary. Silence spoke. Louder. Our eyes met. His gaze held no challenge now. No pretense. Just something raw. Something true. His knee grazed mine again. This time I didn't recoil. A sharp breath caught in my throat. His hand twitched on the tabletop, fingers curling and flexing as if uncertain of their own permission. Neither of us moved closer yet. The gap between our shoulders felt suffocatingly narrow. I shifted slightly toward him. He mirrored my motion. We leaned in, just enough that the air between our mouths warmed. Foreheads nearly brushed. I traced the line of his jaw, the slight furrow above his brow, the way his eyes darted between mine and my lips. I stopped breathing. So did he. But we didn't bridge the space. We hovered in that fragile pause, as if the moment itself was too delicate to shatter. Maybe that's what made it real. Not the kiss we nearly shared, but the decision not to, because it meant we both understood the gravity of what crossing that boundary would bring. I leaned back first. Only a little. He followed just as deliberately, like we had silently rehearsed this choreography. I looked down at my hands. You know this shifts everything, I murmured. Yes, he answered. But maybe that's not such a terrible thing. I glanced up again. There was something in his expression I hadn't noticed before. Hesitation, yes, but also hope. And maybe a trace of fear. I felt it too. The moment lingered between us. But now it felt less like a burden. It felt like a question, one neither of us had answered yet, not with words, not with movement, but it was there, waiting, and neither of us had left the room. Not yet. After that night, nothing stayed the same. But not in the way I had imagined. Not with grand announcements or bursts of color, or even that unfinished touch we never allowed to linger. No. The transformation crept in softly, like a subtle current shifting beneath still waters, unseen, yet undeniable. The next day at work, he spoke no syllable to me. We crossed paths in the corridor. His eyes slid past me, not piercing through but gliding beyond, as if locking eyes would shatter something fragile. Maybe he was right to be cautious. The Q. Quiet stretched through the days. He skipped the morning team huddles. Messages came via his assistant rather than in person. Feedback vanished. Those lingering looks evaporated across the open-plan space. Only sterile distance remained. I told myself it was for the better, but it never felt that way. Concentration slipped away during meetings. I lingered at my desk long after everyone had left, not out of necessity, but out of a foolish hope that he might emerge and utter a word. Any word. But that never came. Then the message arrived. Subject: new assignment. Hello. You'll be transitioning to the Vanguard project for the next 6 weeks. Collaborate directly with Chloe. I'll be stepping back from daily oversight. No reasoning, no preamble. Just a sudden detour. A new gap. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't the task itself that stung. It was what it meant. I was being shifted aside, relocated, gently, efficiently, without drama or confrontation. I thought about walking away. More than once. Late at night, perched on the edge of my bed with my face buried in my palms, I imagined leaving everything behind, finding somewhere new. Somewhere my inbox didn't make my heart ache. But I stayed, because no matter how hard I tried to convince myself it was one-sided, that maybe I was the only one feeling anything, deep down, I knew better. You don't look at someone like that if it means nothing. You don't stop yourself from crossing that line unless it means everything. Still, the silence lingered. Days blended into one another. The office air felt thin and sharp. I began avoiding the conference room altogether. Then, one evening, about a week after the reassignment, I heard a hesitant knock at my apartment door. It was late. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened, he was there. Mr. Wells, Dorian, no tie, no jacket, just a soft gray sweater and worn jeans. He looked altered, gentler, exhausted, and scared. I wasn't sure you'd open, he said. I said nothing, stepping aside to let him in. He paused before entering, like asking permission to step into this fragment of my life. He moved slowly into the living room, standing awkwardly by the bookshelves. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. After a moment, do what? I asked. He faced me, voice low and tentative. Be this version of myself. I remained silent, letting him find his words. For so long I kept everything separate, he said. Work, feelings, wants, like locking them into different compartments. So nothing mixed or became tangled. And now it's tangled, I whispered. He nodded once. With you, it is. But I don't want to pretend it isn't. The room settled into silence again. I heard the radiator's gentle clicking, the distant hum of a street lamp outside. He looked down, then back at me. I want you to be part of this, he murmured. Whatever shape our days take. I stepped forward slowly, my chest constricted, but it wasn't dread anymore. It was something different, something that whispered promise. You don't need the map just yet, I replied. We'll discover the path together. His gaze held mine. For once, no doubt clouded his eyes. I reached out for his hand. He didn't hesitate. His fingers found mine, hesitant at first, then sure. We stood still, hands entwined, suspended in a moment outside of time. The room around us blurred. The noises of the city faded away. All I sensed was the warmth of his touch, the weight of silent feelings finally taking form between us. He closed the distance. No words this time. No questions. He leaned toward me and I met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, careful, like we were guarding a fragile secret. Then his hand cupped my cheek, and I wrapped my arm around his waist, and suddenly we stopped thinking. We were simply present, fully, truly. His lips tasted faintly of dark chocolate and something undefinable, something like truth. When we parted, no words were needed. We stood with foreheads touching, breathing as one. Because this time, it was real. And neither of us ran away. It's strange how habits shift. Long ago, late nights at the office meant loneliness, stress, sitting under harsh lights, unnoticed, unheard. Now it means something else. 4 months have passed since that evening in my apartment, since he knocked not as a colleague, but as a man, hesitant, sincere, and ready. Since we finally kissed without fear, much has changed quietly since then. No grand gestures, no announcements, just small, deliberate shifts. He transferred to another division, managing projects removed from daily oversight. I was assigned to a different team with a new supervisor, clean, professional, and discreet. We still share the same building, the same floor, but now there is space where it's needed and closeness where it matters. Boundaries, yes, but no. Distance. We're no longer hiding. Sometimes we share lunch, not always, but often enough. Some evenings, we walk to the subway together, chatting about work, books, or nothing at all. He's quietly witty, unexpectedly so. I catch myself watching him when he doesn't notice. But now, I don't have to look away. There's a steadiness between us now. A rhythm. Something genuine. Tonight we stayed late, not because we had deadlines or urgent tasks, simply because we chose to. I reviewed quarterly data. He read through a pitch for the board. The office was mostly empty, the dusk outside fading to soft blue, city lights flickering on like distant stars. At one point he rose and walked to the entrance. Then I heard it, the sound I'll never forget. Click. He locked the door. But this time, my chest didn't tighten. It softened. He returned, sleeves rolled up just like he always did when settling in. "Hungry?" he asked. "Starving." He pulled a takeout bag from behind his desk. Japanese food, my favorite. I don't know how long he'd been hiding it, or if he planned the surprise. Probably both. We sat at the conference table, unpacked. The containers passed chopsticks back and forth like old habits. He told me about a client call in Tokyo. I shared a story about a new intern who thought I was older than I am. We laughed. It felt easy. At one point, he reached out casually, placing his hand over mine. His thumb brushed my knuckles softly, just once. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. Later, after the food was gone and the lights dimmed, I stood by the window, gazing out over the city. He came up behind me, placed a hand on my shoulder, then leaned in, his chin resting near the hollow of my neck. We stayed like that for a long time. Breathing, quiet, together. No masks, no performances. Eventually, I turned to him. His hand slid to my waist. "I still remember the first time you locked that door," I whispered. He smiled, softness and understanding in his eyes. "So do I." I traced the collar of his shirt with my fingers. "Back then, it frightened me." "I know," he said. "But now?" I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. "It's the first time I haven't felt confined." He looked deep into my eyes, fingers tightening gently around mine. "I felt chosen."